Hey,
Hello.
we are live streaming, so just beware.
Oh, perfect. I love your background.
I'm going to turn mute on.
The screen is a slightly reduced. Is that normal? You're on mute. Sorry.
This webinar is recorded live. It's live on YouTube. It's also live on our website. And you use the chat to send us messages, or you can answer questions, Q&A, that will be answered after Carrie is finished with her presentation. During her talk, if you come in with a chat question, I will make it possible to interrupt or add or tell Carrie that there's a good segue with the area that she's at with her presentation. And at 7 p.m., I'll give it another minute, and then we will drop this share, and I'll let Carrie come up with her program. And I want to thank you, Carrie. It takes a lot of work to put these together, and sometimes it's not pleasant or fun to talk over insurance issues, especially when some people have had problems or have a lot of difficult questions, and it's complicated. When everything goes well, it's perfect. But when it goes bad, it can go badly. Okay, I'm going to stop my share. Again, this is Seven Seas Cruising Association's webinar. SSCA does not create or provide the content. Opinions expressed are not necessarily those of SSCA's board of directors, employees, or members. We don't endorse or promote the use of any information contained, and viewers should independently investigate and research any opinion or advice. And with that, I'm going to drop the share, and I will turn this over to Carrie. And you want to bring up your screen?
I do. 1 second. Alrighty. Everyone see my screen? Perfect.
I see you and I hear you. Of the participants that are on the registered and on, can someone tell me if they can hear us okay? Just go to chat and tell us you can hear it. No, I'm assuming that people can hear it. All right, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Perfect. And I understand we have Lynn on the call as well. Is that correct?
Yes, I think she's looking at.
Wonderful.
That is disabled. I can hear you. Okay, that's Bethany. Hi, Bethany. Why is chat disabled?
Okay, well, you figure that part out. I have a lot of ground to cover. And in case there are folks that are on this call who were not on our July 15th call, I will be repeating some of the same information, but not all. Since the July 15th webinar, I've had many calls for help with claims, not just from Hurricane Beryl, but from other claims. I've had fires and drownings and an explosion. So we jump in on all kinds of scenarios. So I've made this somewhat generic, but we're going to talk specifically about some claims challenges in the Caribbean in particular. So I'm sorry, I don't have the most popular topic. I'm sure Joan could talk about some things that are much more popular, but I'm talking about the shady side of insurance, which is the fine print that everyone loves to read. And I'm not even sure what happened to my fine print, but this was my legal disclaimer. I'll make sure Joan gets it, but basically the gist of it is, this is kind of funny, actually, it came out this way. But the gist of it is that I'm not an attorney. This is not to constitute legal advice. I have not reviewed your specific insurance. So this is an encouragement for you to consult with your agent, with your policy, your documents. This is specifically just to give you an overarching review of the insurance industry and how claims work. So here's the audience we are looking for that will help you determine if you're in the right place at the right time. So we're hoping that you're either someone with a claim against a third party, which might be someone who is properly insured with a company or a provider that is financially viable and accountable, verifiable, or licensed with a solid public reputation. That means they have money to pay claims, right? Hopefully, you know if your provider has money to pay claims and you've done your due diligence and your research. This is for people who act as though they don't have insurance and they want to understand how to get the most benefit from their insurance. And this is for those people who purchased insurance from the Wild West and they can't understand it. They want to cut to the chase and know what they can or cannot rely on. And this is for people who have a scenario, especially after Hurricane Beryl, and maybe self-insured and want to know, okay, number one, how do I get insurance in the future? Or how do I respond if I was impacted by someone who does have insurance? So moving on here. Okay, I want to shed a light on the bottlenecks. And I have had since July 15th, I've had some painstaking conversations with folks who have very definitive bottlenecks. Some of the bottlenecks are involving salvage companies, wreck removal companies, other boats that may have fallen on their boats that they have to wait to get removed. And of course, their insurance company has to approve the removal of their boat before, your boat can get removed. It's kind of a domino effect. So, the other bottleneck that we run into really often is, my industry, the insurance representatives. We really like to bog people down with paperwork. And so hopefully I'm going to simplify some of the paperwork that's required so that when you do have an audience with someone who is articulate and can understand what you're trying to accomplish to close your claim, you know exactly what is required of you and you've already started to prepare it. We talk about the bottlenecks with our insurance, but also there are some bottlenecks with third parties. So there's a shortage of contractors. There are bottlenecks with facilities, and I'm going to get to this in a moment, but there are some facilities that unfortunately boat owners expected to take care of their vessel. Boat owners expected them to put them on jack stands and chain link them and properly block them and watch over their vessels. And we're going to talk about some of the contractual issues and limitations related to that. And I know there's been some yards and marinas who issued their contract, if you will, after the fact. I say if you will, because a contract usually has two signatures. And some of the facilities after Hurricane Beryl issued these quasi contracts that didn't require two signatures. The problem with that is it's really difficult to enforce it. So it's just a matter of understanding exactly what message they're putting out to the public. And then I want to talk about the bottleneck of secondary claims. So hopefully you're all watching the weather. And if you're not, you're going to hear a few reminders throughout this to be watching it, because if you have a secondary claim when you have not mitigated damages for your first claim, you will have some challenges on insurance. So you'll have a bottleneck of the first, the second, maybe even the third claim, because we are facing the most historical predictions for hurricane season ever. And uh, I can't even stress this enough. You're a party and you are, the risk manager behind your insurance. So we're going to talk about what you need to do to move your claim along as well. And then we're going to talk about bottlenecks with property. So when I say property, I'm talking about, okay, so maybe there's some debris at the marina or the boatyard that has interfered with your ability to proceed with your claim, or even if you don't have a claim, with just rectifying your own situation. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, so common contract clauses. I looked at one in particular that came to me several times. It was Tyrrell Bay Marina. And I know this is disputed, but some of the things that you'll find is the marina accepts no responsibility for damage as a result of lifting or chalking. Some of the contracts, I would say majority of marina contracts, especially during storms, will say that a marine facility liability is limited to the amount you paid for your services or for storage. And then the one I just referenced a minute ago, the completion of all works is subject to weather. I'm not sure what happened. I'm so sorry, but I'm going to keep going on this. So this is with respect to salvage and wreck removal. And I understand the pain of this shock factor that, your vessel might cost $15,000 to $20,000 to remove or to move into a better place or to right it, so that it is sitting in the right orientation. And there's this question about, what if I wait for a better deal? If you wait for a better deal and your vessel's on its side and it's compromised by moisture, by other people's property or boats on top of it, the problem is your claim may be denied in the future. So, even though you might be facing a bill of $15,000 to $20,000 to right your vessel or to remove it if it needs to be removed, the problem is that may be your only option. Don't wait. The reality of salvage rights is that, whoever is righting your vessel or rescuing your vessel from an emergency in most jurisdictions has the right to salvage the financial rights of your vessel. So what does that mean? That means that if the emergency warrants it, they can claim rights to title of your vessel or bill you for the full value of your vessel. So don't wait. If you are in the middle of a claim and you're not sure, is that $15,000 going to be paid by my insurance, consult with your adjuster and get written approval. The cost of liability and wreck removal can sometimes exceed the value of your vessel. So this is not something to delay on. Sorry about this. So again, are you watching the weather? I have no idea what just happened, but your summer and winter locations do not override the wording in your policy that relates to your navigation. So let me just bounce forward. I'm not sure what happened, but bear with me, Joan. Okay, so the summer and winter locations are confusing to some people. And I often get this question that states, I actually had one recently that was quite interesting because it was from a couple that teach in the industry. And their application said that their summer location was one place, their winter was another. But because their navigation box said that they were allowed to be in the Caribbean, they just thought, well, my summer and winter location don't matter. They're not part of the contract. So we're going to just go to the Caribbean. And the reality was, and this happens more often than you can imagine, they did not have coverage for the Caribbean between July 1st and November 1st. So they basically voided the coverage in their policy because they were focused on that navigation box that's on the declaration page. So it's very, very important to look at everything you submitted with your insurance, which includes your signed application, your storm and hurricane plan. In your application will have itinerary that has your summer and winter location. It'll have details about your absentee warranty details. That means if you're leaving your boat in the Caribbean, you had a caretaker and you clearly articulated what that caretaker was to do as a result of you leaving the vessel. So if you go to an insurance adjuster and you say, well, I couldn't reach my caretaker, or my caretaker was busy taking care of 30 other vessels, I'm really sorry to break it to you, but you signed a warranted policy. It's a contract between you and the insurance company, not between the caretaker and the insurance company. It is your responsibility 72 hours before the storm, at least, to arrange for a different caretaker and get approval from the insurance company if that person is not available. So these are the kinds of documents that determine your coverage. This will be available later on YouTube. And I think, Joan, you can probably share the entire document because we'll get that whatever happened cleaned up. So the message is articulate. But these are the documents that you have to pull together when you file a claim. Basically, you're spelling out the who, what, where, when, and why, and how. I'm going to get to this later in our presentation, but phone calls, text messages, and WhatsApp do not constitute an agreement from an adjuster. So if you have an adjuster who has agreed to proceed with an expense on your claim or a repair or a salvage issue, make sure you confirm it in writing. And when you confirm it in writing, it's not just you confirming and telling them what you're going to do. It's you confirming, this is the conversation we had at this time on this date. And here is what you agreed to do. And you're going to state, if this is not in accordance with your understanding, please confirm back to me. Okay, so that all goes in writing in an email. No phone calls, no text messages, no WhatsApp. Little difficult message when you're in the Caribbean, but when you can get to internet, that will hold up when you go to appeal your claim. So these are all the kinds of documents that you're going to need to keep. Joan, I'm going to end a little bit earlier this time because after the webinar last month, we had a lot of questions that came in after we closed. So I'm hoping that we have enough time before the hour is up so that I can address specific questions. But I'm gonna whip through this so that people have this documentation. They can go back to YouTube or to the presentation and refer to it as a checklist for the type of documentation that they need to file a claim. If you're partway through the claim and you have not compiled all of these things, you can also use this as a checklist so that you're not waiting for the adjuster to come back to you and tell you in 2 weeks, oh yes, provide this one more thing. I was looking right before the webinar at the Tyrrell Bay Marina contract, and they're asking for some of the same documentation to be on file with them that insurance companies want to see. So just a quick review of what that means. You're going to have your customs clearance, your boat registration, your passports, your insurance documents, which include not just your insurance policy, but your application, your hurricane storm plan, your absentee warranty questionnaire, your survey, your letter of compliance, your maintenance log. Yes, your maintenance log. If you had a formal rigging inspection, you want to have that, because let me tell you, when your vessel topples over with all of those other vessels and you can't provide rigging receipts, records, or a formal rigging inspection or documentation in your log that shows that you're annually inspecting your chain plates, that's a reason for claim denial. So make sure you're getting your paperwork in order before the adjuster is coming to you to ask for it. If you are on a trajectory where you assume that your vessel may be declared a total constructive loss, I've had 3 scenarios just in the past week where folks have asked me, do I have to accept a total constructive loss? Now, when you're thinking about whether or not you want to accept that, think about the fact that sometimes adjusters will declare a total constructive loss if the cost to bring the contractors and the vendors to the scene will exceed the value of your vessel. So part of that reasoning and that appeal might include a plan to figure out how you can relocate your vessel in a cost-effective way, which may mean coming up with a scope of work, a timeline, and confirmation from the new facility that they can actually even take your vessel. Otherwise, it's only hypothetical. So, a lot of the domino effect piles of boats after a hurricane, unfortunately, are declared a total constructive loss for that very reason. Because even if the adjusters all unite in deciding that, we can repair all these vessels and we'll just put them in the queue to get repaired with the 3 contractors that are available to do this one particular kind of work, maybe rigging or something else. Even if they all get on the same page, which is highly unlikely, the reality is we're at the beginning of storm season. So if the scope of work may take 4 months to complete, and I mean, if you're in the Caribbean, and I'm sure Lynn can probably give you lots of scenarios on this, trying to get parts and components in a timely manner is very, very challenging. And so the filter that adjusters are using when they declare a total constructive loss is, can this be repaired? And can the damages be mitigated so no further losses occur before the next storm? We're at the beginning, folks. We still have several months to go of hurricane season, and normally we don't see storms this early in the season causing this much damage. So really think very carefully about this total constructive loss before you decide to appeal it. The other thing too to factor in is, if your vessel is declared a total constructive loss and then you want to buy it back, sometimes that's an option with some insurance companies. My rule of thumb is, you don't want to pay more than $5,000 for a total constructive loss on a vessel that's under 500,000, because of the fact that it is going to cost the insurance companies more to discard of it in the Caribbean, especially. The other thing is, if you have a vessel that's a total constructive loss and you buy it back, it's very difficult to insure it. So make sure you have a plan of where you will go that will accept you without insurance. And the other thing is, some people think about this as a money-making business. Joan, if you own a boat, do you ever think you're going to make money on that boat?
No, we
I'm
don't,
just
we
picking on you.
make money on a boat. You lose money, but you enjoy it.
Yeah. So, but I've been through lots of total constructive loss scenarios, and I'll tell you that, that the challenge isn't just the fact that you're not making money as you're spending on it, but even if you just rescue this love of yours, for lack of a better word, for the purpose of reselling it, it's going to have diminished value. And you have to disclose that it's a total constructive loss. So there's a secondary claim that people can file. I always say, look, if you're going to file a claim, make it count. So most insurance policies have this clause built into it, which I like to call an allowance. An allowance is something that you don't ever get dinged for. You're not going to get punished or penalized for it, because of the fact that insurance companies want you to utilize this. A hurricane haul out allowance will pay a specific amount by foot or a specific flat dollar amount for you to haul out and prevent further damages to your vessel. Some of the policies will include, a hired licensed captain to relocate your vessel. Some of them will include supplies if it is deemed that those supplies will prevent further losses. So keep those receipts. If you're filing a claim anyway, consider filing this as part of your claim. If you don't know if this is your right, let me tell you, whether it's this or you're not sure of whether or not your claim falls within your deductible and it's worth it or not, file the claim. There is a formal process, and this was something we didn't cover on the last call, but there's a formal process you can go through to formally withdraw your claim if it ends up falling within the deductible. Now, I never advise that if there are third parties involved and you're going to be paying out on the liability side, because you never know what's going to be claimed on that side. But if it's only your own vessel, file the claim anyway so that you can be in compliance with the two-sided contract of your insurance. And then if you want to withdraw it later because, you can pay within the deductible, there is a formal process you can go through. All right. So, moving on here. Reporting a claim. The most important part of this, we're almost at a halfway point, and I'm not at a halfway point in our presentation, so I'm going to try to speed it up so we have time for questions. But most important thing to know is every policy has a timeline reporting requirement. Some of them are 24 hours. Some of them are ambiguous. They say as soon as practical, as soon as possible, as soon as known. When it's ambiguous like that, you have to prove that you were in compliance. So if you knew about a claim and you waited 30 days to file it, it's going to be really hard for you to prove that. Moving on in this timeline, the most important thing is you have to have approval for anything that involves money. So if you're just getting a contractor to come out and look at your vessel, I had a lightning claim today. Actually, it was from about a week ago, but it was filed today. And the person asked me, I've got a mechanic coming out. Can the mechanic come without any permission? I said, oh, okay, that's great, as long as there's no money changing hands, because your insurance company can actually deny your claim if you approve something that they were not involved with and they didn't have a right to inspect in advance. So he checked with the mechanic, who, interestingly enough, had not disclosed that he would be charging a fee to come and just assess the situation. With lightning, oftentimes they have to do destructive testing. So a lot of times mechanics and contractors will charge a fee for that. So it's important to know that, and important to know that you have to have approval, and not just verbal, but remember, it has to be written approval from your adjuster. Okay, moving on. The right brain side of this, be patient. I know this is heart-wrenching. I'm not trying to be insensitive to that, but if you're not patient and you don't realize that there are secondary issues like other boats that have to be resolved first, then unfortunately putting emotion into it won't resolve it. You have to exercise and implement diplomacy. And people like Lynn are just doing massive amounts of work to try to collaborate with people, to share information. to organize webinars like this so that everyone can help each other. So while you are being patient, don't wait passively, wait actively, and make sure you're collaborating with other people to work on solutions that are outside your insurance, because that will just really help the insurance process. All right, so hang on a second here. So, most important thing in getting your claim approved is the adjuster determining that the cause of loss is approved. So, if the cause of loss was because you didn't follow your storm plan, it's not going to be approved. So, tough message here. Go back and review your storm plan from before Hurricane Beryl. It's a formal document most insurance underwriters require. And if you review that and you know in your good conscience that you didn't follow that plan, maybe your boat was at a different location, don't waste time with the adjuster or yourself, because it'll cost you money, it'll cost you time, it'll be a painful distraction in your life. Just realize that, look, I didn't comply with the warranty, the contract, and the policy, and then start working on a solution outside of insurance. If you're not sure if your insurance will respond and you need a second objective opinion, we don't charge for that. If you're Canadian, there are different avenues to go down as well, but we don't charge for it. And as a matter of fact, I make it very clear to Joan, to the point where she's probably getting tired of me saying it, but if we help on a claim, look, you will realize what your rights are, and you'll come back to me and ask me to work on your insurance, and we're going to say, look, I'm really sorry, but we helped on your claim. Conflict of interest for us to help on your insurance in the future. We can refer you to other places. We can tell you all the options available in the industry that are AM Best rated or accountable to Lloyd's of London, because we don't work with companies that are not. And we might be able to refer you to competitors that we respect very much, but we won't work on your insurance. All right. I get asked this question when claims are going wrong. I tell you, and I work in the industry, how often do claims go wrong? Well, Joan hears a lot of complaints. Other organizations contact me as well. I have yacht brokers contact me often because they have a claim for a customer they sold a boat to that's going wrong. We had one a couple days ago. It was a fire. The person was away from their boat and the boat exploded, and the person's like already started talking to an attorney. That's the first thing that people want to do. I'm going to caution you not to do that, because there are protocols and accountabilities built into the insurance industry. Whereas you can appeal a claim, you can appeal something that's going wrong, but as soon as you get an attorney involved, those appeal rights go away. So be careful about that. But don't stop paying your insurance premiums. Not because I need more money, because I won't get involved with it. But if you don't pay your insurance premium, it immediately becomes their scapegoat and their reason for denying your claim. This is a two-sided contract, and contracts are always, always, always based on money. Money, money, money. Okay, I'm going to get to a little pain point for me. And Joan probably knew this was coming. There are a lot of folks on this call, hopefully, that have purchased Edward Williams insurance. Edward Williams is backed by Ion, and this is some wording from their policy. I'm not going to read it to bore you to death, but if you are one of those people who have a claim that has been denied or that is not going well with Edward Williams backed by Ion Insurance, and that's ION. It could be Ion South America. It could be Ion Insurance, one of their other sister entities. But if you have a claim that's not going well, please reach out to me. We are, as an industry, trying to collaborate to hold them accountable to paying claims. I am not an attorney. Again, this does not constitute legal advice or any promise or commitment. However, this collaboration really is going to be a catalyst of change for providers who are not paying claims. So I would encourage anyone who is a victim, and I don't use that word lightly, but if you are a victim of a claim denial that you feel is unjust, please reach out to me. Now, there is a reality that there are different Edward Williams policies. One of them, the South American one, specifically states that you're basically waiving all your rights, and and I got to tell you, I'm taking risk in saying this publicly, but their policy says that the jurisdiction you have agreed to is South America, and you are waiving your rights to pursue legal action against them when you buy their policy. So a little shocking there. But if you accept the policy, you're agreeing to this. So if you are one of those people, we would love to see some change in the industry related to this in particular, because we really feel like the insurance industry should be based on trust. And this particular policy and these clauses are not fostering that trust relationship. So please reach out to me. My contact information will be at the end of this webinar. I would love to talk to you about your scenario. All right, here's another exclusion that they throw in there. If you're above a 4.6 on the Beaufort scale, I mean, you're all probably way more intelligent than me when it comes to weather. But most people, when they buy their first insurance policy, they don't have a clue what that means. So you might want to refer to this link to understand what that means. But that basically means, look, you're not going to have insurance coverage if you bought that policy. Make sure you know who you bought your insurance from. Who you buy insurance from is not your agent. It's not, I mean, that's your advocate and that's your representative of the product, if you will. But who you're buying insurance from is actually who is going to be funding the check, the payment for your claim. If you bought Edward Williams, it would be ION. If you have a claim that's not going well and you do want to leave your provider because of that, perfectly understandable. However, if you do that, don't just stop paying your premiums. Go through the formal process of canceling your insurance with a written request, because otherwise it can affect your future insurability. I talked about this on the last call. There were Canadians on the call. I'm a dual citizen, so I understand Canada very well. I was licensed in Canada. I'm no longer licensed there because Canada does not allow it. If you were one of the people, and there are many, who purchased insurance from a US insurance agent or broker, and you are a Canadian citizen with a Canadian flagged vessel or any combination thereof, and you do not have property in the United States where you are paying property taxes, let me tell you, your insurance representative did not have the license to sell you that insurance. So there may be other provisions available for you if you are a victim of that scenario. Canada requires that you insure with a locally admitted agent. And if you went through a US representative, they also have to go through a local Canadian representative, because Canada requires a piece of the pie. They want to have PST and GST taxes on your insurance premium. And this can be disputed if you like, but let me tell you, you probably won't win, because I was born in Canada and I was licensed in Canada. The only way to get around it is ignorance. But once you know about it, you don't skip that rule. Insurance agents are held accountable to knowing that rule. It's part of international trade practices. And so if you bought from an insurance agent in Florida, I'm sorry, but you might find your insurance to be invalid because of that. There are a few providers who have reciprocal office arrangements in Canada. For example, Gallagher is the largest broker in the world, I believe. I have to look at the latest stats, but for a long time they have been. They have an office in in the Caribbean, and they have access to many, many programs. So if I just bounce over here, I have a list up from one of our other presentations. So if you want to take this down, these are the Caribbean Gallagher folks, and these are all the markets that they have access to. That right, Caribbean only coverage. That means you're not coming back to the US except for maybe, a week for some incidental repairs or a funeral or something of that nature that's very incidental. So they have a reciprocal arrangement with Canada. I don't exactly know how it works, but they have a very large Canadian presence. So they have a way to work around that. Other than that, US brokers can't really help you on that. All right, moving on here. Read the fine print. We talked about that a lot, how to research your insurance agent, your insurance provider, do your homework. On the topic of doing your homework, these were some resources we provided in the last call for surveyors. Remember, your insurance adjuster is going to have the same problem that you do in securing vendors in the Caribbean. So take these resources that have been provided, that have been vetted, that have been shared, because these were unanimously referred by insurance providers we know that actually are paying claims. And, there's some great resources here. So get in line, give these people a shout out. Why do we do this? So if I could just get on a little podium for a second here. We don't do this to write your insurance in the future. The last thing I need to do is write more boat insurance. It's a ton of work. I'm doing this to help. So, the way to express your gratitude for that is if we help you on a claim, you know what, consider connecting with an organization called the Hope Fleet. They deliver supplies and some incredible responses to the Caribbean and the islands, Bahamas. After disasters, there will be more. This is a picture. I love this one because this boat left from our location from Stewart, from a marina, and they brought these garden buckets to the Bahamas. Joan, wasn't it like 1,400?
Yes, and they were some were SSCA members who came, but boats came, picked up the buckets, and took them to Bahamas. And hopefully just is still working heavy in the Hurricane Barrel area. Lynn's been involved with that too. But they actually have the boat registry. They fixed the manifest for the boat so they could just hand it to the government. We're using our SSCA connections and networks. Now have through those islands people able to pick up the item from the boat, handle the customs, no fee, and it's going to where it should go instead of being diverted. But this, I think, has been the first time. I think there's been about 50 boats. And one cat carried at 1.5 tons. So they're loading from St. Vincent, they're loading from Grenada, they're loading from Trinidad, and some places further north. Right now, it's slowed down a lot because of the storm, but hopefully they've done an absolutely marvelous job. Young, energetic, very active, and doing a good job.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I would fit in that description you're so generous with of the young and energetic. So, we took a little bit more of a passive role and our team put together, we call them like toiletry kits, but I think Hope Fleet has a different word for them. It's on their website. But if you want to participate and you can't send or you can't, go and do a project with them, consider doing something like that where you're funding something that's going to help with the folks on the ground after a disaster. So that's what our team did, and then we packed them in buckets so they're ready to go with whatever boat is going next. And we just love this organization, and they're positioned very well. I know after Hurricane Dorian, they did a lot with going in and helping with actual construction projects to rebuild infrastructure that impacted children in the community. So if you have a heart for children, connect with this group. If it's not this group, there are so many other ways to help. So if we help on your claim, my challenge would be just to give back. Find somewhere, some way to give back. So how do you get new insurance after you had a claim? Well, first of all, if you're staying in the Caribbean, reach out to Gallagher. They have more markets than any agent here. And they're very, very creative in figuring out a way to articulate everything correctly. And let me tell you, they were voted one of the most ethical brokerages in the world. And I'm talking to you about someone I compete with. I don't have access to all the markets they have. So consider that. But some providers look at claims going back 2 years, some look at 3 years, 5 years. Some of them will forgive a claim if it's related to a hurricane and it was outside your control. You will have to explain the circumstances. But it is possible. But the one thing I would caution you on is if you've had a claim, you have to articulate it on future applications. So recap here. You're going to document, read the fine print. Do this with your adjuster, do it with your insurance, be patient, think outside the box. Last time we talked about the fact that, one of the things I would love to see happen in my lifetime, which probably won't happen, but I would love to see the trust factor reestablished with insurance. It started in London based on a trust factor. And this is our mission statement, to make sure that we're approaching insurance with this entrepreneurial servitude so that we can empower basically your bucket list. Best practices. Okay, the first one is so hard. We have 5 grown kids and now 9 grandkids. And I have one of my girls is super emotional, and I always say, look, you can accomplish 80% of your challenges in life if you just go to bed, right? When you're tired, just go to bed. And part of that is just, when you're talking to your adjuster, when you're talking to people at the yard, when you're trying to come up with solutions of how you're going to deal with these salvage companies that want to charge you an arm and a leg, check your emotions at the door. That is not insurance advice, but it's better than that because it will take you so far. Number 2, avoid phone approvals. So if you're on the phone talking to your adjuster, because that's just easier than jumping on a computer or an iPad, make sure you confirm in writing. And confirmation doesn't mean you're telling them what was said on the phone. It means that you're soliciting their agreement that it is in accordance with their understanding. So the same thing with emails, with chats, with WhatsApp, everything has to be confirmed in writing. Okay, final thoughts here, and then we need to open this up for questions. The most painful thing for me in my job, I've been doing insurance for 35 years. Most painful thing for me is to explain to someone what their rights are during or after a claim. I have a scenario on a super yacht right now where someone had a horrible claim, and their claim could have been paid had they understood their rights and how to appeal them and enforce them. So people are learning that after the fact. We are a culture of people who just sign every DocuSign that comes across our computer and our phone, and we don't read them because we know, what, if I don't sign it, I'm not going to get the contract. So what you're going to do, even though most voters are way smarter than me, you're going to print out the document. You're going to redline the parts that you can't agree with. You're going to initial them, and then you're going to send them back the way they are. That way, at least you have a chance of being able to live with that fine print. But more important is if you're signing that contract and you realize, look, you just signed away all your rights, which I gave you an example of that in this presentation. Don't buy the insurance. Because if you're signing away all your rights, it's an overreach in that contract. So know your rights before, during, and after a claim. Save all your documentation to the cloud, not paper, not stored in a file somewhere. Have them all in the cloud, because if you get to the point where you settle your insurance, you're going to be asked for all of these things. Here's my contact information. Because the purpose of this webinar, once again, is number 1, to help you with your claim scenario. If you hire a public adjuster will charge between 8 to 12% of your claim. That's a licensed position. I am not a licensed adjuster. And as such, I'm just going to help you with understanding the rights in your policy and advising you about that. I don't charge for it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, which is my manipulation here, is to challenge you to give back when you get to the point where you're able to give back. So with that being said, I'm going to turn this back over to Joan. I haven't looked at the chat yet. So Joan, I don't know if you had any questions come in or
we
if
have
anyone
some good
else.
ones. We have
Yeah,
some.
okay. So I'm ready for questions.
Shall we drop the share?
We can, because I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Hang on one sec. I think I've dropped it. Did that work?
That's okay.
Am I still sharing?
Yes, you are.
Oh, hang on. Let me try this again.
If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. That's
Can
your
you
name.
turn? Oh, here we go. Here we go. This should work. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now you can talk directly. Lynn is muted because she either has three frogs in the background or car traffic sound, but we know she'll pop up if necessary. So we have, well, Behan Giffords is on, and I'm really pleased to see her. She's a good friend. We have an anonymous attendee, and the question is, lots of people likely in the situation where they are at risk because another boat, fallen rig, or the boat itself is in the way of them moving to a safer place in the yard. The other boat has not got their claim approved and can't or won't proceed with their cleanup. What are the issues, solutions? Does taking things into your own hands with agreement of the other owner cause issues with their claim?
So I've had that question posed to me a few times since our last webinar. And without knowing all the specifics, it's tough for me to answer that. The challenge is, I mean, this is where we just have to connect with humanity. The other boat owner with the boat that has to be moved before your boat can be moved is also in a horrible predicament, waiting for approval and watching the weather and wondering, what am I going to do as well if a storm comes in and there's more damages? So, my advice is really not so much insurance advice as much as it is, be kind and compassionate. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. If they don't have permission and they move their boat, they can void their insurance without that approval. And so there are a lot of emotions involved. And so exercising diplomacy and empathy for that other person while you're also going through the same thing is super important.
I would think that collaborating with the others in the same situation at, say, a marina, where you have some people that are having trouble, with their getting their insurance taken care of or filing their insurance. If you can help do that, I mean, it's benefits for you, is to try to help get them on the path, and then you can get on the path. I mean, I think I can't think of any other
you
way
can
to do it.
certainly also refer those folks to me, because if they have one of the bottlenecks on their claim that I'm very familiar with, it may be something that I can assist with. If I understand their insurance scenario and what the holdup is, then, we might be able to fast track the claim. I cannot advocate or represent someone where I did not broker the insurance. So to be very clear and articulate, I am only coming in as a coach to help them understand what they can do. It's like, Joan, it's like having kids, right? I have to tell them how they can address this, and I'm going to coach you through it and help you with the right articulation, the right details, the right appeal process, and the right documentation. So if you're a victim of that scenario, I mean, the reality is, like, there are domino boat pileups after hurricanes where someone's waiting for 10 other boats or 30 other boats to be moved before theirs can be moved. And the only time I see the ability to have authority over someone else's boat and their insurance is if the yard enforces it. If the yard or the marina enforces it, or they have a contractual clause that says, look, if you don't remove your boat, we have that right. That's quite different because then the insurance companies have to respond. You're muted.
So the instance at Tyrell Bay where they've hired a salvage company for X number of dollars a foot to do either the boat righting or the rigging and whatnot, that would trigger the insurance company, or the insurance company would have to go along with what the salvage people were doing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's really a challenge. It's kind of like going to a doctor and they give you a cash price and they give you an insurance price, and then neither one is consistent, right? So, some salvage companies have pre-negotiated rates with insurance companies, some don't. So, you might have a salvage company coming in who has a pre-negotiated arrangement with 2 insurance companies and not the other 10. And then I know in that particular marina, there are boats that were permitted to come in without insurance. So in that particular scenario, those people are gonna get a completely different price. But the reality is, the marina is not liable for that. It's not gonna be at the marina's expense. And the way salvage rights work, in most of the world, and again, I'm not an attorney. I went to law school, but I did not sit for the bar. And the way most salvage rights work in most jurisdictions is whoever is the salver who is righting your boat or moving it out of the harm's way, they have the right to give you a bill 6 months later for the full value of your vessel. And if you don't pay up, they can take title to your vessel. So if they really want your vessel, they have that right in most jurisdictions. I'm not an authority on legal jurisdictions in the Caribbean. So you might talk to an attorney about what those rights are. But if we're talking about $15,000 for pretty valuable boats, that pales in comparison to what their rights may be.
Thank you for that. Now, Michael has asked, can you provide a statute for Canada regarding limitations regarding buying coverage from a non-Canadian licensed agent? Perhaps a website describing this requirement?
Okay, so I think I know what this scenario is about. So if you purchased from an insurance agent in Florida, for example, then Florida insurance regulations that govern insurance licensing would apply, and you would involve the insurance commissioner. I'm required to have a license in every jurisdiction where I write insurance. And if I write insurance in a jurisdiction where I don't have a license, it is subject to fines, penalties, imprisonment, and with removal of my licenses, all of them. So it's very important for insurance agents to only write insurance where they're licensed to do so. So the problem is, trying to figure out how to enforce a Canadian requirement on a Florida broker will be much more difficult than it would be to go to the insurance commissioner about misconduct of an insurance agent selling coverage in what we call a locally admitted country. A locally admitted country is any country that requires that you go through a local agent. So Mexico is also one of those. In Mexico, you can't buy insurance from an American broker. You have to buy through a Mexican broker. It's same as Canada. So basically on both sides of us, we've got locally admitted countries. Iceland is another one. There's a whole list of locally admitted countries where, it's based on the free enterprise concept of the United States. They want you to work locally and they want you to pay taxes according to their tax laws. But in that scenario, if you went through a Florida broker, your easiest path to appeal that is to go to the insurance commissioner in Florida. There's a consumer website you can go to because, just because you're Canadian, you didn't understand that law. That's a law that's imposed on insurance licensed people in general.
Now, we have quite a few people attending.
They just want to see your beautiful view.
And we're in first. So anyway, we have, if people want to raise their hand, if they want to actually talk or ask a question, I can allow you to talk. I just need you to raise your hand. Bottom of the screen, you see raise your hand. If you do that, then you can talk and ask questions. I'm sure that Tony Gonzalez might want to ask some questions.
Hmm.
And there's Michael. So anyone interested in asking questions?
So, and a reminder, as we're coming up with questions, if you are a victim of this insurance I'm talking about with Edward Williams Ion Insurance and your claim is not going well, please reach out to me. I would love to understand your story and, understand if there's some way I can help.
Yeah, there's other agents too that have bumped into offline. Although sometimes they're surprising. It's just the way the policy's written. You've got to read your policy.
Yeah. And in all fairness to people who say, well, I didn't have it to read, the challenge is that, sometimes people buy insurance and then they get all the forms and the wording, 30 days later after they bought it. And all of a sudden it has a minimum earned premium that says, if you canceled it, then you're going to have a penalty. And there are ways to appeal that as well.
Now I'm going to mute because Dan Lewis has a question. He raised his hand.
Okay, so Dan, you'll have to unmute.
Unmute.
There
I'm
you
sorry
are.
about that.
That's good.
You can tell I'm on the other side of the generation gap.
I think a few of us are too.
So actually I have two questions. So the first one is, it kind of sounds like in some cases that, well, I think somebody asked earlier what the percentage of insurance claims that sort of get denied. And, if it's hey, you need to know your insurance policy backwards and forwards and know the fine print and kind of be maybe study law, but not pass the bar in order to make sure that you get the coverage that you need. I just wonder how many people are filing insurance claims that, were potentially valid, but they got kicked out because of a fine line item that they weren't aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, it's what I'm, as you can probably understand, what I'm most passionate about. An insurance agent's job as the retail agent is it is intended to go beyond just a transaction at the beginning of every policy year. They are intended to be your advisor and your confidant and your coach, if you will, to help you understand that fine print. You do need to read it. However, in scenarios like I was referring to earlier, where it's overreach of the insurance company and their forms, and it's really not based on fairness. There are ways to appeal the claim, and if your agent's not helping you, I'm more than happy to jump in and help out. But there are a lot of claims that unfortunately are denied because people didn't understand it. Marine insurance is the hardest insurance in our world, and it's the one type of insurance that is based on a two-sided contract.
Okay. Second question is that, a lot of us are out there with $250,000, $500,000, $1 million boats or above. And so, yeah, you definitely want to insure those. But where is the line that you would draw to say, you know what, it really comes down to with potential getting a claim denied, the value of your boat, having it basically them say, it's not worth salvaging, et cetera. At what point do you say it's just not even worth getting insurance and just self-insure?
Yeah, great question. So, I'm curious, Dan, are you in the Caribbean?
No, I'm not.
You don't have to tell me if you are, if you want to, but so like if you're in Canada or a few states in the United States that really don't have much water, or you're in the Caribbean, you're legally required to have insurance. But I did a video series probably 2 years ago, maybe it was, on the case against insurance. And I talked about the rates and the trends of the expense of insurance and looking past the expense of it to the cost of the deductibles and the cost during a claim. Because there are a lot of things that are not covered by any policy, like your living expenses when you have to shack up in a hotel somewhere. It's just not covered. So it can become very, very expensive. So, I'm a huge advocate of, look, if you have money in the bank to recover from a catastrophe and you can do it without insurance, by all means, just make sure that you are your own best risk manager, if you will. That being said, I think the most expensive policy that I sell for a boat, private pleasure boat, not a charter boat, but for a boat, is about 350,000 a year. It's a lot of money, and we go over this question very, very often because that particular boat, I mean, it's a tough risk, but it doesn't have named windstorm coverage. It doesn't have lightning coverage, and it's an aluminum hull, but it doesn't have lightning coverage. And there are a lot of exclusions that I would not be happy living with if it were my boat. But it's a lifestyle choice also, Dan. If you're going into a marina that you really just love that culture and that marina or that boatyard requires insurance, and all of a sudden, you have to have insurance. If you have a loan, you have to have insurance. If you are boating near other boats that are very expensive and you don't have enough money in the bank to cover their boat and the value of their boat, well, maybe you should not buy insurance, but boat around boats that aren't so valuable, right? I'm not trying to make fun of this whole scenario because, when you were talking about the Caribbean and we're looking at rates of, 2 to 6%, a lot of times, especially when you look at the coverage and the deductibles and the exclusions, it makes sense to not buy insurance. But if you do that, you must have a plan of where you're going without insurance and how you're going to take care of your vessel, because you can't haul out at a yard unless you already know what yard will take you without insurance. So then you're in this
Okay.
like vicious cycle of, okay, I can't haul out because I don't have insurance, and I can't get insurance because I have to haul out for a new survey because I didn't have insurance before, and now the insurance is requiring a survey. So I tell people there's a way to do it, but the only way to do it is with a tremendous amount of planning and your own risk management.
Now, one
All
thing
right.
that I did bring up was the agents. And you brought up as agents being important, as kind of advisor or whatnot. If they're giving you advice on your policy and the wording on your policy, or they're saying something in addition to what's on the policy, that's not legally binding, is it?
Well, that's a trick question there,
I know.
Joan. So Joan, if I tell someone that, they can move from Carriacou to Petite Martinique, and I don't confirm it with the underwriter with an actual endorsement or written agreement in my file, let me tell you, my insurance is pretty expensive, and it has a lot of limitations and requirements on my malpractice insurance, which is called errors and omissions. If I put something in writing, my errors and omissions coverage will fill the gap that the boat owner's insurance will fill. And if there are any of my customers on this call, if you tell me you don't read the fine print, or I get any indication that you didn't read something I sent you, I read it to you on the phone. And then I send you something that says, here's what I explained to you on the phone, and I make sure you agree with it. So the agent has a ton of liability. especially with marine.
Do we have any more questions? Dan, thank you very much.
Thank you both.
What we'll be doing is putting the videos up on YouTube. I'll finish processing it and stick it out on the SSCA YouTube channel, and I'll put in a news article on the homepage for SSCA, so you can pull it, and I'll get the slides from Carrie and make those available the same way. So you can get them from, and I can send to everyone who's attending a copy of the slides if they would like them. Carrie, thank you so much. I mean, you're doing a lot of hard work. Lynn, do you have any questions or comments? Here's another question. Oh, here's Ken Goodings. One of the takeaways I'm getting tonight is that Canadian vessels wishing coverage in the Caribbean need to have insurance from a company that has Canadian approval. Canadians purchasing insurance from an American or a Caribbean insurer won't work. Is that correct? Or
Well, it works until it doesn't. You know, and I guess the advantage is like some of them are actually paying the claim because they know that they didn't do it the right way, or they learned somewhere in the process that Canada requires you go through a locally admitted agent. So, you know, maybe that works for good in some ways.
Lynn has now taken down her, there's Lynn, go for it.
Okay,
I want
so
to hear the frogs.
yeah, you're going to hear them unless I can talk over them. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing because it's often a question that comes up with almost all of the groups saying, "Oh, where can I get insurance?" And a lot of people recommend Caribbean insurers, like Anjo or Anyo, however you want to pronounce it, is a popular one, and they've actually seemed to be doing their job. And there's a few other insurers down here that people mention too, and it's like, yeah, you don't know what their background is. So basically, the takeaway, one of them is Canadians can't use them. So that's something we have to mention is that no, as a Canadian, you need to check with a Canadian insurer or you might have a problem. We don't get a lot of Mexican cruisers here, so that's not going to be a concern.
Yeah, remember, the Canadian insurer is not the agent. It's the actual, you know.
Yeah.
The underwriter.
Yeah, the under. Okay, and so the other thing too is that, you know, further to the not being insured in the Caribbean, some of the yards, and I'm not talking about Tyrrell Bay because they already made it clear that they didn't require insurance at the time. Although it's interesting now, they're now turning around to some people and saying, "Show us your proof of insurance," and if they don't like it, they're becoming a problem. So there's a whole thing happening there.
Yep.
It's a squeaky wheel who's getting hit hard. But some of the yards down farther down in Grenada, outside of hurricane season, sometimes turn a blind eye to being insured, but during hurricane season, you must be insured to be in the yard. And at the very least, they require a third party. I believe one of them was reaching out to you, Carrie, about the possibility of them having some insurance that might be able to be offered as a short-term thing for people who are up to that point not insured. But the other thing not being insured is I know specifically of a boat that took damage during Beryl. They had literally had them in the slings. They were not insured, and they said, "Sorry, we can't take you," and dropped them back in. And so, which is an unfortunate thing, but the yard also has to cover their own backsides because of the whole insurance thing. And so it's a serious consideration if you start thinking about the fact whether you want to try self-insuring. It puts a lot of roadblocks up, and sometimes at the worst possible time. This boat eventually got a local insurance insurer to get them third-party insurance, and so they managed to get hauled out and taken care of. But it is certainly a big caveat for a lot of people.
Yeah, some comments I might make on that is, you know, if you have damage and you're trying to get into a yard and you don't have insurance, you might consider looking at port risk. Port risk means that you cannot use the vessel for any purpose. That's the definition with most insurance companies. That means you can't even sleep on board. And what they do is they put this port risk caveat on your policy that says, you know, they're only going to insure it for port risk, not while it's underway. There might be an occasion where they add a navigation to get it to a yard for the port risk. But for the most part, if you want port risk, you have to do some research and legwork to make that happen. Meaning you have to compile a very articulate, detailed scope of work that includes a timeline and cost factors for each thing on the scope of work. If you don't do that legwork and you're just asking for port risk, insurance underwriters and adjusters know that they may be signing up for port risk indefinitely. So you have to work with the project manager or a boatyard to come up with that scope of work, the timeline and the cost factors in order to ask for that in the first place. But answer to the first thing you said, about marinas suddenly requiring insurance. So more than half of my business is marine facilities. I do boatyards and marinas and other kinds of marine businesses. And what happens is the marina has a coverage called Marina Operators Legal Liability. And when boats don't have insurance, their insurance may or may not kick in depending on the scenario and the policy for the boats. And it's never the intent of the insurance companies to cover all the boats in the marina under the marina's insurance, because then it wouldn't be affordable for the marina. But what happens is marinas will have a loss, or they'll have a scenario where all of a sudden the underwriters see on the news that they have a boat pile up. And then all of a sudden their insurance company requires that anyone they're hauling out has to have insurance. So it may not be their fault. I have a boatyard that had several claims. And after they had several claims, their insurance underwriter said, and every market said, we will not insure this boatyard unless you require insurance 100% of the time, listing them, the boatyard, as additional insured, which gives them defense rights under the boat owner's policy. So a lot of times it's triggered by claims.
Carrie, thank you so much, Dan and Lynn. Any other thoughts, Carrie?
You know, Dan was talking about the sorry for paraphrasing, Dan, but really the trickery and the challenge of understanding insurance. And I totally concur and agree with that. If you don't understand your insurance policy and you just need an objective third-party review, feel free to reach out to me. I think our contact information is in the webinar.
Okay, also we have another, one more question that just came in. From an anonymous attendee, my insurance has indicated that while our boat is being worked on, there's no coverage. Is this common?
There's no coverage.
Yeah.
I would have to give you the proverbial, it depends. So there are some policies that exclude structural work or hot work. That's an example. That's a common example. Hot work is welding. But I would have to look at the policy to understand what the rights in the policy are and what you could possibly change. For example, port risk. So that scenario I just gave was coming up with the scope of work that includes the timeline and the amounts, might be a way to appeal that, you know, timeline of no coverage, because they won't cover something they don't know. And the more you can articulate, the more likely they are to make an exception.
And I hope that answered that for everyone. So Carrie, thank you very much. We do these pop-up webinars every now and then. I'm sure that we'll probably do one again this fall. And I will see you at the boat show for sure. Up in Annapolis.
Yes,
Boat Show.
we'll be in Newport and Annapolis,
Annapolis.
Fort Lauderdale.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Lynn and Ken. And again, Dan, thank you for becoming part of the program. And if there's no other questions to be asked, I am going to end this with a big thank you to AMG International Insurance LLC, and Terry Gonzalez, the CEO. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan.